watched someone who seemed completely unbreakable just come apart? And I'm not talking about them having a bad day or a tough week. I'm talking about a complete and total demolition of who they are. This is what happens when a person who's built their entire identity on being invincible suddenly isn't. Here's an uncomfortable truth. We've all seen some version of this. That person in your life or at work who always seems to have it all together, who is always in control, and then one day they just completely unravel. It's something much deeper than a normal breakdown. They don't just break. And it is never a quiet crack. It's a loud, messy explosion. To really get why this happens, we have to first understand the incredibly elaborate mask they wear for the rest of the world. So here's the wild paradox at the center of all this. The person who appears to be the strongest is often, secretly, the most fragile. It's like they've built this massive, impenetrable fortress around themselves, but the whole thing is made of glass. You have to understand, in their world, they are the king or the queen. They write the script, they direct the actors, and they are always, always the hero of the story. Every single interaction, every relationship, it's all just a part of their kingdom, designed for one purpose, to reflect their own greatness back at them. And that right there is the key. Their entire life is a performance, a really carefully managed one. They're playing a role, the brilliant mind at work, the perfect partner, the most fascinating person at the party. And they desperately need you, the audience, to believe it. But what happens when the applause suddenly stops? All right, let's peel back a layer and look at how their ego is actually built. Because underneath that grand, confident facade, the foundation is dangerously unstable. This whole thing hinges on a concept called narcissistic supply. You could think of it as the psychological fuel they run on. And it's not just something they enjoy. It is a desperate life or death need for constant attention, admiration, praise, even your fear. Without it, their very sense of self starts to flicker out. So if their life is the stage and they're the star performer, then your attention is the only spotlight that matters. When that spotlight goes out, they're not just standing on a dark stage. For them, it feels like they cease to exist. They're just alone in a terrifying, empty void. And this is what makes the whole structure so precarious. Their self-worth isn't internal. It's outsourced. It's totally dependent on you, on their job title, on their social status. It's a house of cards built on the foundation of what other people think. So what happens when that foundation starts to crack? This brings us right to the moment of impact, the trigger point, the moment that supply line gets cut and the whole performance is forced to a grinding halt. I mean, what really happens when someone just gets up and walks out of the theater? When they stop clapping? When the world stops reflecting that perfect image they've worked so hard to create? What could possibly push them to that point? Well, the triggers are usually things that puncture that perfect image. A partner finally saying, "I'm done." Getting fired from the job that was their entire identity. A public humiliation, maybe on social media. Or sometimes it's as simple as someone they thought they had under their thumb, just saying no. Each one of these isn't just a setback. It's a critical, mortal wound. And in an instant, their entire reality just shatters. The person who saw themselves as the king on the chessboard is suddenly revealed to be just another pawn. All the power, the status, the control they used to define their existence, it's gone. And the fall from that high is absolutely catastrophic. So let's look at what the collapse, the implosion, actually looks like. Because this isn't some quiet, dignified retreat. It is a violent, chaotic storm that ripples outward, and it often damages everything and everyone in its path. What you see on the outside is just this explosion. This is what we call narcissistic rage. It's a volcanic eruption of blaming, screaming, and accusing. But on the inside, it's the total opposite. It's a feeling of absolute terrifying powerlessness. The puppet strings have been cut and they are just flailing. And let's be crystal clear about this. What you're seeing is not sadness. It's not genuine grief. It's a desperate, frantic scramble to regain control. The rage is a weapon designed to scare you back into your seat. The sudden playing the victim is a tactic, a plea to get that spotlight to swing back onto them. And all of this leads us to the final, and honestly, the most important reveal. We've seen the performance, we've seen the fragile foundation, we've seen the collapse. But what was it all for? What was it all protecting? What is actually behind that mask? Now, you might think this is all just about losing something tangible, losing a job, a relationship, public respect. But it's actually not. The narcissistic collapse isn't really about the loss of power.
No, it's about the terrifying thing that all that power and control was hiding. It's about that moment the curtain gets ripped away and they are forced, for the first time, to look at what's been backstage this entire time.
And there it is, the real reason for the collapse. When all the external validation is gone, they're forced to look into a shattered mirror. And in that reflection, they don't just see a flawed person trying their best, they see nothing. An unbearable, terrifying emptiness. The whole grand performance was never really about building themselves up. It was about desperately hiding from the fact that, deep down, they believed there was nothing there to begin with.
So what do we do with this? After understanding all this, why does recognizing this pattern actually matter for you?
Well, if you have ever been on the receiving end of this kind of collapse, you know how deeply confusing and painful it is. Understanding the psychology isn't about excusing the harm they cause. Not at all. It's about giving you a map to understand the chaos. It's about seeing, finally, that their reaction wasn't about you. It was about their own internal world completely falling apart. When you really boil it all down, a narcissistic collapse is just the deafening sound of a fragile world, an entire identity built out of other people's opinions, finally breaking under its own impossible weight.
And all of this leaves us with a final, pretty powerful question. We've just explored the most extreme version of this, but the truth is, we all wear masks to some degree. So it's worth asking yourself, what parts of my identity are built on solid ground? And what parts are maybe just a performance, waiting for the applause to stop?